Good morning. I almost said thank you for tuning in. I need to update my vocabulary and getting away from like television imagery to online imagery. But anyway, we're very grateful that you join us each week as we go through our time of trying to keep the church going, even though we can't open the building. And we're walking through the Sermon on the Mount. I hope this will be helpful, whether or not you're Christian or religious or anything like that. That this is, I think the great teachers were really talking about our humanity. They were really talking about reality and life and nature and that kind of thing. And you can call it religion if you want, but it's more about how to be truly alive, how to be truly loving. So we're walking through the Sermon on the Mount as a way of remembering a time when Christianity understood itself to be about truthfulness and kindness. And I think right now with the kind of religion that has gripped the nation, it's really important to remember that, to get back to the source and remember that the original religion was not about superstition. It was not about control, domination. It was really trying to set people free. And it wasn't perfect, nothing is, but it was a much better start towards our common humanity than what is often presented as Christianity today. So today we're looking at the teaching on anger. And of course, anger is just a part of who we are as human beings. It's a feeling, and like every feeling, it's important. Excuse me. So Jesus isn't saying don't ever get angry, but I think what every great teacher has also said is that anger, while it's very important, it has a power that we need in the world. It also can lead us away from our highest values. It can get us operating at a level that we're not very proud of when all is said and done. So at a time when there's so much bitterness, at a time when there's so much violence, and you just see the culture kind of imploding. I used to go to the Capitol, and it was guarded by the Texas Rangers. And they used to look sort of like Andy of Mayberry. They had the cowboy hats and maybe a sidearm. But, excuse me, when you go now, it looks like a military base. And you've got people in flak jackets and military weapons. And you just realize something very bad has happened to our culture and to our country. And we need to get back, I think, to a deeper, simpler, kinder time. This goes beyond the division of left and right. I think at Fox News, at least as a person that leans more to the left, leans a lot more to the left, I can see in Fox News the bitterness, the hatred, the dishonesty. But I also feel that when I watch MSNBC, I don't think they lie anywhere near as much. At the same time, there's that kind of self-righteous fury that takes over. That's much more sinking to the level of the evil we're trying to confront than calling us to our higher nature. So wherever you come from on the political spectrum, ultimately we're talking about universal human rights. If we do have a common conversation, we're talking about what does every human being deserve and how can our lives be ambassadors for that world. I think that's what Jesus meant when he talked about the kingdom, the realm of God, the way things should be. So whatever political niche you occupy, we're going to be called to something greater than that. Anger, bitterness, again, survival mechanism. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have anger. But I think we also have to think about what that's doing to our blood. When I let myself get constantly angry, when that becomes not just an emotion, but it becomes a mood, and then it becomes a worldview, it eats at me from the inside out. And so we're looking at Jesus trying to help us find the roots of our humanity that's deeper than the bitterness, the confusion, the anger that surrounds us. It's calling us to the roots of our humanity. This is the way Jesus presented it. Jesus said, "You've heard it was said long ago, you shall not murder. And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a member of their human family will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a member of their human family, 'You fool,' is answerable to the court. Anyone who says 'You fool' will be in danger of the fire of hell." Now, I don't believe in a literal hell, but I do think there are ways we can live and think and feel that make life feel like hell. And I think that's what Jesus is talking about. Whether or not there's a place there, I don't buy that, and I think that's a very destructive idea. That there's a torture chamber that's there for eternity. But I also think we need to symbolize those ruts we get caught in that make us feel alone, that make us feel bitter, that make us feel arrogant. I think what Jesus is talking about is very similar to what Martin Luther King was talking about in a very famous passage. And incidentally, I think he was reading Buddha when he said this. I quote this a lot, but it's also found in Buddha's Dhammapada, the basic thought that's here. He says the ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it. Through violence, you may murder the liar, but you cannot murder the lie, nor establish the truth. Through violence, you murder the hater, but you do not murder hate. In fact, violence merely increases hate. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. And this is where he's quoting Buddha. He says, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." What both of these great human beings and spiritual teachers, I think, are saying is that anger, like every emotion, has a strength and a weakness. It has, like a knife, it has a blade, it has a handle. And we need to learn the art of every emotion that we have. If we're not careful, anger becomes a cyclone inside of us, and we get wrapped up in it, and it's very hard to get out. Just thinking about what anger does to our blood, what bitterness does. I forget who it was that said, anger is like drinking poisoning and hoping the other person dies. There are lots of ways of saying that. But the point is that whether or not our anger injures the other person, it does damage inside us. And it actually weakens us. When somebody else can push my buttons, I'm less powerful than when I'm in control. When I don't just react to somebody else's obnoxious behavior, what's obnoxious in my opinion. So I think that a lot of the leadership of the country right now is very good at making people reactive to things. And as important as it is to do things like take down Confederate statues, I agree we need to do that. At the same time, that needs to not distract us from the fact that they're also taking away the right to vote for people, that they're engaging in voter suppression and this kind of thing. So we need not to become so reactive that we think being against the president is a positive goal, is a positive direction. We need to remember what the positive is that we're aiming for. What is the value that is making us angry when we see it violated? again, we're trying to get to the roots of something that is deeper than the storms, so that we don't deny the storms, so that we can work for justice, struggle for justice, but also enjoy our days upon the earth, to have peaceful hearts, unwounded hearts, from which to do the work. Jesus, in this part of the Sermon on the Mount, is reframing what he's been taught as a young boy. He's not rejecting Judaism. I think he's getting to the heart of Judaism, that no great religion is literalistic or legalistic, that you have to use your mind, you have to take responsibility for your situation. So what Jesus is trying to do is take us deeper into the passages where we realize that it's not enough to just not hate somebody. Or it's not enough just to not hurt somebody. We have to empathize with their humanity if we're going to remain sane. So what he says is, when you call somebody a fool, you're already on your way to hell. Again, I don't believe in a literal hell, but I know that sometimes life can feel like hell, and our hearts can feel like hell. And the more we let bitterness rule our hearts, the more life is going to feel like that. Our spleens are going to be perfectly happy, but our hearts are going to feel thirsty and starving because they are seeking not just to reject the negative, but to seize the positive, to establish that, to be creative in going in that direction. So anger is something that's very important, but there's an art to working with it. Someone once said that anger is like a rocket. If you give it a direction, it is power. It's transportation. But if you don't have direction for it towards the positive good, it's not a rocket, it's a bomb, and it's just going to explode on you. So I think watching Jesus' anger is very helpful. That story where he knocks over the tables in the temple is often seen as him condoning violence, but it's important to realize he's not hitting the people. He's driving out the cattle, he's knocking over the tables, but there's nothing in the story where he's attacking people. And this is very important because anger is appropriate, but if we want to change the world, we need to focus on the systems of oppression and power and not just enter into some sort of a melodrama where you have good people and bad people in a fight for power. We need principles that work on both sides of the aisle. So when we see Jesus knocking over the tables, that is a model, a paradigm of anger that has been given to love. It's dealing with the social injustices of keeping people away from God in the story. But it's not vilifying the people. It's not attacking the people. It's just removing the obstacles between the people. In a sense, what's being asked is that all of our emotions don't get lost. They get dedicated. They get consecrated to love. The love that does justice. So the anger that we have gets rerouted into changing the world, an energy to change the world. If not, we get stuck in it. If not, we get caught in bitter fighting and bickering and this kind of thing. But when it's consecrated for the higher struggle, it becomes all power, all dedicated to our highest values. If not, it becomes that cyclone. And we become self-righteous, we become short-sighted, we become the reflection of what it is that we hate. So Jesus says, even if you're going to your church, your mosque, your synagogue, and you remember that there's somebody who you've wronged, forget about your church, your mosque, your synagogue for a moment, and go make it right with that human being. Now see, that's a whole new idea of ethics. It's not saying God is sitting there as the judge, and if you get angry, God's going to send you to hell. It's saying that when we get angry, there's something sort of judicial about that. When we judge each other, we're already caught in a kind of court, and we're judging ourselves in the same way that we judge other people if we really knew it. So what Jesus is saying is it comes down to relationships. And focusing on the relationships gives us a power that self-righteousness can't. When a medic goes into a crisis, every feeling that person has, the medic has, or the first responder, is consecrated to the larger good. They don't mourn every person they run across. They don't get stuck in their indignity at things that are happening. Instead, they'll have to process that maybe later. But at the time they're dealing with the crises, and they're bringing as much compassion and goodness as they can to that situation. So there's a peacefulness that they carry inside of themselves because they consecrated their emotions. They've given their heart to this service to humankind. I think that's what Jesus is talking about. I think that's what Buddha is talking about. That there's nothing wrong with feeling anger, bitterness, sadness, all of those things. But love is powerful enough to transform even those kinds of energies. So just like a boxer doesn't want to lose their temper, it's okay to get angry, but that needs to not become reactive. In the same way that we are more powerful if we don't let our buttons get pushed. Jesus is saying anger isn't evil, but it's an energy that you have to learn the art of. We have to learn the courage that it takes to be gentle, to be non-reactive, to consecrate ourselves and not lose sight of our highest values. So Jesus said, you've heard it said in the past, don't murder somebody. But the roots of that violence go into our emotions and our feelings. When we label somebody, when we dehumanize somebody, we've produced a storm in our own heart. So he's saying there's a peace of mind that you can carry into that storm. But we have to consecrate our emotions to our highest values. Again, the way Dr. King put it, or Buddha put it, whoever you want to give credit to. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence. Adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. We know that, but we certainly forget it from time to time. So take these treasures in your heart as you go out into this week, and know there's always peace in there waiting for you. Go in peace.